The EU and UK reach a deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol after months of painstaking negotiations.
The Kremlin says the conditions for a peaceful solution in Ukraine haven't been met yet in response to China's 12-point peace plan. Turkey says it'll resume talks in March on Sweden's and Finland's bid for NATO membership after discussions stopped in January.
Struggling to find jobs and places to live, thousands of Ukrainian refugees are leaving Spain in search of better opportunities.
Brexit is back in the headlines, and this time, after much anticipation, there's a deal. After months of painstaking negotiations between the EU and the UK, an agreement has been struck on the highly controversial Northern Ireland Protocol. It allows goods to move across the border with Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland without any checks. And with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in London on Monday to seal the deal, she says what they're calling the Windsor Framework will allow for a fresh start in the relationship.
This new framework will allow us to begin a new chapter. It provides for long-lasting solutions that both of us are confident will work for all people and businesses in Northern Ireland. Solutions that respond directly to the concerns they have raised.
Under the current rules, goods are checked at ports in Northern Ireland on arrival from the UK, after which they can be moved into the Republic of Ireland. The new proposals, however, would create two different lanes. Goods destined just for Northern Ireland would travel through a green lane, where they're not checked. Goods destined for Ireland and the EU would go through a red lane, in which checks would be carried out. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also announced a new mechanism that will allow the Northern Irish Assembly to veto any changes to rules on EU goods. It's called the Stormont Break. And he believes it will satisfy all parties.
This will establish a clear process through which the democratically elected Assembly can pull an emergency brake for changes to EU goods rules that would have significant and lasting effects on everyday lives. If the brake is pulled, the UK government will have a veto.
The European Court of Justice will still have a role as the final arbiter in any disputes between the EU and UK, however. The question now, though, is if this will satisfy hardliners in the British Tory Party and Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, given that removing the court's jurisdiction is one of their main demands. The deal will now be brought before the UK Parliament. Christopher Pitchers for Euronews.
The Kremlin says it welcomes China's peace proposal for Ukraine. However, the spokesperson for the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, claims the conditions for a peaceful solution had not been met for now.
Еще раз повторяем, что в настоящий момент мы не видим никаких предпосылок для выхода всей этой истории в мирное русло. Пока специальная военная операция продолжается. И мы движемся в сторону достижения тех целей, которые были поставлены. Не вижу необходимости это комментировать. Вся эта информация была опровергнута с китайской стороны уже.
Whilst the West is sceptical of the 12-point plan, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's open to meeting his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, but urged Beijing to use its influence to put pressure on Russia to withdraw from Ukraine. Turkey has agreed to negotiate again on Sweden and Finland's membership bid with NATO. Discussions began last June but were called off in January. There were several anti-Turkish and anti-Islamic demonstrations in Sweden when that happened. But now the Turkish foreign minister says talks will resume from March the 9th.
Terörle ilgili endişelerimizin bu iki aday ülke tarafından karşılanması gerektiğini başından beri söylüyoruz. Bugün İsveç'te bu faaliyetlerin hepsi aynen devam ediyor. Bununla tüm uluslararası toplum olarak birlikte mücadele etmemiz lazım. Ama NATO üyeliği konusunda taahhütler var. Biz bu adımları görmeden İsveç'in NATO üyeliğine evet dememiz mümkün değil.
NATO Security General Jens Stoltenberg was in Ankara 10 days ago where he yet again stressed the importance of both countries joining the security alliance together.
A new earthquake in Turkey has left at least one person dead and 110 people injured. A 5.6 magnitude quake shook the province of Malatya, already devastated by the strong earthquakes 3 weeks ago. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who visited the affected areas, apologised for the late reaction in the first moments of the tragedy.
Yıkıcı etkisi, olumsuz hava şartları, hasar gören altyapının getirdiği zorluklar gibi sebeplerle maalesef ilk birkaç gün Adıyaman'da arzu ettiğimiz etkinlikte çalışma yürütemedik. Bunun için sizden helallik istiyorum.
Rescue teams are working to save people under the rubble of collapsed buildings. The World Bank estimates damage in the country at €32 billion. Meanwhile, the Turkish Red Cross is at the centre of a controversy for selling tents to a private NGO just 3 days after the quakes for some €2.3 million.
After dozens of migrants drowned during the tragic Crotone shipwreck on Sunday off the coast of Italy, the Italian authorities, including President Sergio Mattarella, are requesting the EU do more in order to manage migration and avoid loss of life at sea. But after expressing its condolences, the European Commission reiterated the position stated by EU leaders at the last European summit, that the issue must be handled together.
Migration is a European challenge and must be tackled together, jointly, and this is what we are doing. There is a legal obligation to rescue and to ensure the safety of life at sea.
Beyond the declarations, there's been few concrete advances. Indeed, the European Commission proposed a major change on EU migration policy with its Pact on Migration in September 2020. But member states have since been stuck in negotiations. An action plan for the central Mediterranean has also been proposed to better coordinate search and rescue operations. But for human rights organisations, this is not the way forward.
We have seen European policy mainly focus on externalization policy, strengthen the approach with leverage and conditionality. That's not a solution, that's a part of the problem, because externalization policy are leading to an increase of human rights violation and the number of deaths. We have been clearly seeing in Crotone yesterday. The only elements and the only solution that could avoid the people risk their life at sea is to increase legal pathway and legal access to European Union.
It's not the first attempt by migrants to go from Turkey to Italy by boat, a longer route than usual. More and more are now trying, with over 15,000 people doing so in 2020. Human rights organisations say it's happening because boats from Turkey and Lebanon are avoiding Greece and Cyprus, whose authorities are pushing them back in violation of international law. Experts also say that some EU countries like Italy are making it harder for NGO boats to save people at sea. The idea of an EU naval mission dedicated specifically to search and rescue is for now off the table.
Ina came to Spain with her daughter to flee the war in Ukraine. After spending several months in a reception centre, she now lives with a Spanish host family. They say they're deeply grateful for the help they've received from the government, NGOs and Spanish society as a whole. But 1 year on from Russia's invasion, many refugees are still struggling to settle in Spain.
Перша проблема – це незнання мови. Без знання мови жодної роботи не знайдеш. Тому ми почали вчити мову. По-друге, треба підтвердити свій диплом.
Only 15% of refugees have found a job in Spain, compared to an average of 40% in Europe. Many of them are forced to rely on savings and the help of families and NGOs to survive.
Only my parents from Ukraine, they send me money.
160,000 Ukrainians were granted temporary protection in Spain, but 60,000 of them still aren't registered to a Spanish address.
De verdad, hay muchas personas que no tienen casas, que están desplazados, o unos familiares o unos conocidos ucranianos que viven por aquí.
Thousands have been forced to return to Ukraine or move to other countries with better job opportunities and financial aid for both refugees and host families.
Creo que la mitad sí que se quedan de los que están, pero claro, pueden llegar nuevas.
Ukrainian and Spanish associations have demanded financial help for those displaced by the war. The Spanish government promised a monthly €400 subsidy for them, which is only now starting to arrive.
No entendemos cómo unas ayudas ya aprobadas todavía no estén circulando un año después.
At least 22,000 Ukrainian families have already made their way back home since August, despite not knowing how much home they have left.
Porque a medida que el Kremlin recrudece su ofensiva sobre Ucrania, Europa deberá prepararse de nuevo para un posible éxodo ucraniano con decenas de miles de desplazados. En Madrid, Jaime Velázquez, Euronews.
A mini Beatles reunion of sorts. 3 classic Mini Cooper cars owned by Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr have gone on display in London. The vehicles became a symbol of the swinging 60s, and the Beatles were avid collectors at the time. But only 3 of the Fab Four's Minis were reunited at the event, marking the 60th anniversary of the Mini Cooper S. The one owned by John Lennon was destroyed after a crash in the 1970s. It's not known if it happened on the long and winding road.